Now, attachment theory is something you've probably seen online. You may have read about it. It sounds intellectual, doesn't it? But it's not. It is a simple framework backed by decades of research that is going to help you better understand how you and the other people in your life show up in a relationship. And that's exactly what I want to help you do today. I want you to have better relationships. Why? Because you deserve better relationships. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing to have a whole group of friends where you could just text them whatever you're thinking or feeling? You don't have to rewrite it 55,000 times. You don't have to worry about whether or not they're mad at you. Wouldn't it be wonderful to show up in your married life or your dating life and not feel insecure or not feel like you can't trust people? Wouldn't it be awesome to feel so secure, so deserved that you are such an awesome person, that you know exactly how you want to be treated? Wouldn't it be amazing to let love and compliments into your life? You better believe it would be amazing. And the way that you do that is you learn how to improve your relationships. Not only your relationship with yourself, but your relationship with absolutely everybody you interact with. And that's where attachment theory comes in. When you understand your attachment style and you understand how to become more securely attached, you will have a better and happier life. Full stop. You're going to feel safer, more secure. And this is the part I love the most. You'll be able to show up absolutely anywhere with anybody and be your full self. How freaking awesome does that sound? Now, it's interesting because I didn't really understand attachment theory until recently. And now that I've learned a lot about it, I'm like, oh my gosh. My husband, Christopher, and I have basically been talking about attachment theory for 2 years in our marriage counseling every week because we have totally different attachment styles. I also know that a lot of you that are in your 20s right now are reading that book Attached because it became super popular during the pandemic. Our daughters who are 23 and 22 are reading it. And I know that you've seen attachment theory, or maybe you've discussed attachment theory with friends or your therapist. But today, guess what? Everybody is invited to this conversation because we are going to get every one of you up to speed so that you understand yourself, you understand your attachment style, you understand attachment styles in other people, and more importantly, you can use absolutely everything that you learned today to improve your relationship to yourself and others. So, how are we going to do that? Well, I have tracked down one of the world's leading experts on attachment theory. Her name is Dr. Marissa Franco. She's a psychologist, a professor at the University of Maryland. She's also the New York Times bestselling author of the book on attachment styles and how they impact your friendships. That book, it is called Platonic. And don't you worry, I'm going to put all her information in the show notes, just like always. And that's important because it's not just your romantic relationships. You're about to learn that attachment style impacts every relationship, your friendships, your work colleagues, your family, yourself, because attachment style is all about you and how you show up in relationships. And that's why it impacts everything. So let's get you feeling secure and get Dr. Marissa Franco on the line, people. Dr. Franco, I am so excited that you're joining us. Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
In your work, you describe 4 attachment styles. And so the first one is secure. What does that mean?
Secure, you are comfortable giving and receiving love. You trust that other people love you. You can bring up conflict very level-headedly. Your skill is really perspective taking. When something happens in your relationships, you are thinking about the other person's needs and your own and how to balance both of your needs. You tend to be a really good friend. You're more likely to initiate friendships, less likely to end friendships, more likely to maintain them. Very comfortable being vulnerable, but in a flexible way. Whereas anxious people, you'll see them be vulnerable. Other people aren't responding and they're still pushing vulnerability, where secure people are like, if you're not responsive to this, I'm going to become less vulnerable. They tend to look for relationships with other people that are healthy, right? Because their assumption is that I'm lovable and I deserve to be loved by other people.
So at the basis of somebody with a secure attachment style, you have an assumption that you are lovable and that you deserve to be loved.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of like you're on your own side, right?
is
Like
there
you're
anybody on the planet like that? I just, can you introduce me to them? I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Because it feels like that's a very whole and safe and healthy human being.
Yeah. And attachment is a spectrum, right? So nobody's fully secure, just like nobody's fully anxious or nobody's fully avoidant.
So the second one is anxious. So can you tell us
Anxious.
what an anxious attachment style might be?
So your core fear is that everybody's abandoning you. You tend to see rejection even when it's not occurring. Like a friend is like tired and you're like, oh my God, they're rejecting me. They hate me. Or a friend has taken a little longer to respond to you, right? You don't consider other people's circumstances when determining how they're treating you. You just take everything personally. At the neurological level, research finds that your amygdala, which is the part of your brain associated with stress, is more sensitive. It lights up
Mm.
more than people of other attachment styles. Um, you are, kind of passive aggressive in conflict. You are very self-sacrificing until you sort of blow up because you can't take it anymore, right? Your relationships just tend to be kind of unbalanced. It's you giving, giving, giving until you can't anymore. And then you sort of just pull away. You're not very flexible. You can be kind of controlling again, because like I spoke about earlier, you need other people to soothe your emotions. So when someone is doing something and you feel triggered, you almost have to try to control them to get you to soothe your own emotions. So
Mm.
anxiously attached people, they're like kind of avoidant towards themselves. Like their internal dialogue is like, I'm too much, these feelings aren't okay, right? They very much invalidate their own feelings and emotions, which is part of the reason why they really need other people to validate themselves.
You basically just described me. I don't know if you knew that this was a therapy session for Mel Robbins, but Dr. Franco, we just have a diagnosis now. Let's talk about the third attachment style, avoidant.
Yeah. So avoidant people, they fundamentally don't trust others. They think if I get close to you, you are going to harm me. So they don't get close to others. They don't initiate as much. They're more likely to end friendships, more likely to ghost on others, not as emotional, very struggle so much with vulnerability, not only in themselves, but other people. Like if you're vulnerable with someone who's more avoidant, they might pull away from you, right? In relationships, it feels like there's a dance with them where you feel like you're getting close to them, and then all of a sudden they sort of back away. They tend to ignore problems, they minimize them, they ignore conflict, they talk like everything's always okay, and why are you making a big deal of them? Like they have this assumption that people shouldn't have needs, both them and other people. And so when it comes to friendship, they're sort of like low effort and low reward. They don't put a lot of effort into their relationships, and they also feel very disconnected from other people.
Hmm. And then you said there was a fourth one. It's not quite organized, meaning that the style is the style when it comes to connection or like trying to connect, but that it's this fourth one that's a little bit more disorganized, you said. So can you explain a little
Yeah.
bit more about that one?
Yeah, so this disorganized, it's people that have really grown up in more extreme situations like abuse, and so they have to sort of pull out the whole toolbox of strategies to try to find safety. So it's sort of like they kind of flip between anxious and avoidant depending on how you're interacting with them. Once you get closer to them, they all of a sudden might become avoidant and feel a sudden need to very much withdraw. It's like they feel this duality, like I really want to connect with people, but I'm also so petrified of connection. And it puts them in a bit of a freeze state. Like there's this feeling that I'm kind of like paralyzed. I don't know what to do in this relationship. I don't know whether to come close or to pull away because I have both of these needs that feel so strong within me.
Are there personality types that are more prone to like having a narcissist come into their lives?
Well, I think that there's definitely a person who comes from a narcissistic childhood. There's a vulnerability there. Listen, I'm going to say this, Mel, to make this almost as an easy question to answer. Everyone is. There's not a person out there who's not, and I'll tell you why. Because at first blush, narcissistic people are charming, charismatic, curious, confident. They comforting even. They feel like they can take care of things. So if these people were coming in on date one screaming at you and cursing at you, probably not going to be a date two. There's a whole phenomenon of love bombing.
Well, okay, we'll get to love bombing in a minute, but How the hell are you supposed to spot one then if you're dating?
Because this is where the trauma bond becomes a problem. So what the trauma bond results in, not just that alternation between good and bad, but you justify the bad days. Right? So, oh, dad just had a bad day at work. Mommy's just really tired. We're all pushing her to, and then you internalize that blame. Daddy had a bad day at work. I have to be good. Mom's just really tired. I have to help. So like they're trying to, but you justify. Think of everyone in a narcissistic relationship. He had a tough childhood, has a competitive job. The deals haven't been coming through the way they want. They just want what's best for us. I mean, the justifications go on forever, but the justifications keep the toxic dynamic in place. And that's another core pillar of that trauma bond, right? So justify. And so everyone's vulnerable. Because you meet someone and you're attracted to them and they are charming and interesting or whatever it is that appeals to you about them. And they stay that way 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months sometimes. Now you're falling in love with this person. Now the stuff starts to gurgle up, those proverbial red flags.
And what are the proverbial red flags when you're dating?
Okay, the red flags might be things like getting snappy when you give them a little bit of feedback, being really entitled when you go to a restaurant with them.
So watch how they treat waiters.
Watch how they treat waiters. Watch how they treat anyone. How they talk about other people. Contemptuous dismissal. How do they get along with your friends? It may be that one of your friends, the one friend that might have called them out on someone, might be the one friend they say, I don't think that friend's good for you, kind of thing. So those things will pop up. But here's the thing, Mel, I was talking with someone recently on my own podcast, and in her situation, she didn't have 6 years of marriage, not one red flag. I'm going to make people listen to my podcast to hear what happened when the red flags came piling in. But there's someone 6 years. She's like, I am being honest with you. And people who knew me would say the same thing. There was no red flags. So everyone, I'm saying this for one reason.
Why? Why?
A lot of people blame themselves. They'll say, that one day, whether it's 1 year in, 2 years in, or 10 years in, the narcissism shows up. There must have been red flags. I didn't see them. I must be an idiot. This is my fault. This is my fault for not seeing the red flags. And I really want to tell everyone, while some of them may be out there, some of them may be humming at such a low level that you're not noticing them, or they're so reminiscent of what you grew up with. They're like, oh my God, this is nothing compared to my mother, kind of thing. But in the vast majority of cases, the red flags were there. And it's a combination of either people didn't know there were red flags, people justified them, or people blamed themselves immediately. Like, I shouldn't have criticized their sweater, even though it wasn't a criticism, they quickly justify. But everyone is vulnerable. Now, are some people more vulnerable? Certainly. People who grew up with a narcissistic parent or parents, they're vulnerable. People with histories of trauma who already are might be that can often result in self-devaluation and other phenomena that would lead a person less likely to call out the red flags. People who, this is going to be a surprising one, people who come from very happy families with 2 loving parents and just happy, those folks are vulnerable because they can't even believe this exists. So when there's a red flag, they'll often think like, well, we just loved each other through this stuff. There ain't no loving anyone through a red flag. So they might turn to that. There are people who are going through periods of transition. So like on the rebound, people will sometimes meet narcissistic people. When a person moves to a new city, has moved to a new job, has experienced a major loss, these are people who are already more vulnerable. And the idea that someone new is coming into your life, especially, let's say, new city. Ooh, wow, this is great. I'm meeting someone. And you kind of go into the rom-com mindset rather than like, this is moving a little bit quickly, that kind of thing. People who are in a rush are vulnerable. People like, my biological clock is ticking, all my friends are getting married, that kind of thing. Those are folks who may be vulnerable, saying, okay, I'm just going to have to settle here because I really want to be a parent, and this is who's in front of me right now. And I can't tell you how many people have gotten roped in narcissistic relationships because they felt a time clock ticking around marriage, around settling down, around having a child. They really felt like if I don't do this, I don't want to end up like my friend who ended up never meeting anyone and regrets that. I tell you, one thing they regret, probably don't regret, that person. Is exactly. And so all of these kinds of other sorts of vulnerability factors that a person can bring in can increase the vulnerability beyond what we all have. And I think that the idea that all of us, that that somebody's not vulnerable. I mean, again, the unicorns out there are the people who really, really get, like almost see it right away. Listen, I do this. This is what I do. I'm still played. People still come into my life. I'm getting better at it. But to get better at it, Mel, I almost had to become, I feel at times there's a part of me that's become kind of closed off.
So is there one or two red flags that for you are just non-negotiable? Like the second you see that one, you are like, nope. Because when you talk about being closed off, because you are extremely warm and extremely smart and extremely generous. And so I'm just wondering, because I think that what's scary about hearing all this is that by the time you kind of wake up and you're 3 months into something or 3 years into something, and all the bonds are there and the lease is signed and you're married or you have kids or now you've moved in together or now you're like got all the chemicals flooding your body because you're falling in love and you start to hear these red flags. You know, I never would have had the strength, I think, when I
Most
think,
people
like,
don't.
you know what I mean? To be like, oh, okay, time
Nope.
to end this.
No. Most people don't. And that's, again, it's important for people to hear that because a lot of people feel foolish. Why didn't I heed the red flags? I knew it on my wedding day. I knew it. I felt it. Because when we, you know, again, these stories are so easy to tell backwards. But at that point, it would have felt cataclysmic. And in a way, this was the only way you were going to truly get the lesson. You know, it's unfortunate. And the issue then becomes like, when I meet somebody who's a little bit too charming, a little bit too charismatic, I shut down. Well, I'm like, why? What is this? And people are saying, you're the only person I've ever met who walks away from charismatic people. Literally. I've been at gatherings and a person's just that person. And I people must think I have some sort of bowel disorder because I'm like, I have to run to the restroom. The number of times at a social event, I'll say, I have to run to the restroom. People are like, what did she eat?
You know, it's interesting that you say that because I recently had a couple things go down, both in business and life, that were just shocking betrayals, lies, stolen from, all that kind of stuff that just knocked me over. And when I look back through my life, there is a very pronounced pattern of me being drawn like a moth to the flame to very charismatic, funny, kind of rebel-y people. And I get sucked right in. And then I realize once I'm like kind of in the inner circle, oh my God, this person's unpredictable. This person like trashes people that leave the room. This person has major mood swings. And then I literally go into a mode of just twisting myself in knots to not upset the person.
Correct. That's actually a trauma response.
Yeah.
Twisting yourself into knots to not upset the person, or even like, you know, like, oh, you're so great, like the fawning response. These are classic trauma responses.
And it took a couple really painful experiences back to back to have me look backwards. It was almost like life hit me with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is too. You know, I both worked in the media, and you in a much more profound way than me. But I have to say, over the many years I've done this, what I've always seen was the charming, charismatic, grandiose people never, ever, ever followed through on their promises, and sometimes almost to my very real financial harm and all of that. And I thought, and that happened in academia, that happened in other areas of my life. And so I think for me, those things have become correlated in my mind. Big talker, big promise, big, all that big talk, it never comes to fruition. And I got hurt by this. So when we talk about classical conditioning, it's like Pavlov's dogs, right? The salivating dog when they heard the bell. For me, it's charm and charisma means you're about to either betray me, or you're just full of BS. And so that a lot of harm had to come to me to learn that lesson. And when I connected the dots to my own childhood and my own experiences, I could see how I got played. And like I said, now it comes off as a little bit closed off. I wouldn't be surprised if people would think that about me. And I do think that this is, though, in order for all of us to become more narcissist resistant, we need people around us that will back us up. And where I'm really blessed, at least professionally, is a team that calls BS. They'll read emails like, nah. No, no, yes, no, yes. And then I'll go deeper in. And sometimes I'll be like, yeah, sure. And they'll say, listen, it's your gig. You call that one, but we don't love this.
Right.
And so and that's, did I hear that right? In fact, the other night I had an experience that was really uncomfortable. And I was like, was that uncomfortable? And I remember my team like, that sucked. And I was like, oh, and it was so that if you have the people around you who are actually able to be authentic and call out BS, that's also another way you become more resistant to this nonsense. Versus
it's almost like having siblings that bond together, like
healthy siblings.
Yes, healthy siblings,
not siblings that throw you under the bus.
Right.
And I think that because the problem is a lot of people are surrounded by enablers. Oh, come on, he kind of seems like a nice guy, and he's cute, and he's from the same place, and you're. I'm like, he's invalidating you. I don't care how nobody's that cute.
I'm sorry. As a mom now, I'm like, thinking about my daughters. But so what is love bombing?
So love bombing is it's where the charm and charisma turn into behavior. It's the early phase of any narcissistic relationship. We tend to only use this term for romantic relationships. It can happen in friendships, workplace, you name it, anywhere. It is this intense and overwhelming, I'm going to call it a courtship, where a person it's almost an obsessive fascination with you. Is a person trying to win you over. The classical kind of tropey love bombing is on your first date, you go to the best restaurant in town, then they get the concert tickets no one can get. And on your third date, you fly to Paris and you dance till 6 a.m. on the beach. And it's so exciting. And they make a scavenger hunt for you and they get you gifts. And every Friday there's a dozen roses waiting for you. That's love bombing. It's fairy tale. It's larger than life. But I think if we only use that trope, it's tricky.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
it's too
who
simple.
can afford to do that? I'm like, that's how do you do that on a blue collar budget?
I'll tell you how.
Tell me how.
You take people to whatever's considered the best restaurant to your budget. Like the person's still going to think that's great. They'll say, let's go on a drive to wherever the cool place to go on the drive is. I'm going to show you the coolest view you've ever seen in your life. They'll buy things. It might not be.
It's like the whisk you off your feet. I'm proving to you.
The good night, princess. Good morning. I can't start my day without thinking about you. And then there'll be subtle things like take a picture where you're at. I just want to see where you're at. To me, that's this person stalking you. Why do they need to know where you're at? Of course, I am the anti-romance. Do not find me on Valentine's Day.
A couple of those is fine. Not but not on the second date. Okay.
Right. But it's a lot of that. It's intense contact. But love bombing just doesn't look like that. Love bombing may become really intense, almost oversharing really early in the game. Like they're laying out like this really deep, profound, true or untrue story about their past, about their childhood, about what they're feeling. And for some people, that's the play because they'll say, oh my gosh, this person's sharing so much. They're so vulnerable. And now you're kind of in because they've shared so much. Love bombing can be too much time together. Our first date lasted 2 weeks. Like, do you even have a job? Like, what kind of first date lasts 2 weeks? So like when people say that stuff or like, I knew right away, I was like trauma bond, like the minute people say that, I know that sounds so cold, but it's actually not. It is this sort of, people might say like when I first saw them, like I was really attracted to them, but not like I knew right away. But the 2-week first date, there's this intense intention. They spend so much time together. I canceled all my plans to be with them. It was so, their lease came up and we'd only been together a month, but we decided to move in together. Fast. The fastness is also a part of love bombing. It's an intensity. It's what I call an intense indoctrination into another person. They are winning you over. When you're being love bombed, you're so distracted by the sharing, by the obsession, by the texting, by the emails, by the gifts, by the quickness that you're not noticing the red flags.
So what do you do if you're a friend? Because I think oftentimes, if you see this happening to a friend or you as the friend on the outside start to have the red flags go up, and you say something to your friend, maybe you guys should take it a little easier, or I hear he wasn't that great with his last girlfriend, or like you just tried. Like, how do you approach it if you're the friend?
Don't drop a dime on the other person, because the minute you
What
try
do you mean,
to
drop a dime?
meanings like, I heard they weren't great with their other person. He's moving real fast. It's something we learned from doing treatment with substance users is do not make them defend their behavior. And don't make him defend the narcissist. The minute you say he wasn't great with his former partner, have you ever met his former partner? And now they're defending them. Never do that. You got to find the back door.
So how do you find the back
You
door
say
with a
things
loved
like,
one?
You say, how are you, talk to me about your new relationship. How are you feeling? How are you doing? And they'll tell you the story. Wow, that's a lot happening. How do you feel about that? You might be more likely for them to say, it is a lot. Like, I'm trying to go with it because I've always thought like I don't deserve a fairy tale. Now I'm getting the fairy tale, and say, what feels fairy tale-ish about that to you? You're trying to get them to talk without getting them to defend the narcissistic person. Listen, I'm basically trying right now to train people to use therapy tricks here. Right. But that's really what it is, because I think we're so quick to say, I don't like him. The first thing they're going to do is defend him. You've got to get them to talk about the relationship so they start spilling on like, oh, I don't know about this. What do you mean you don't know about this? And let them talk and say, well, if you're feeling like that, do you think there's, do you feel okay? Maybe, I don't know, like take a step back. Like you can do that because it sounds like this person cares about you so much. And I mean, that's a little manipulative, but if you're trying to save someone, you try all the tricks. But what you're trying to do is give them permission maybe to slow down, to pull back, or like saying, he wants to move in right away, and say, you love having your own place. So how do you feel about that? Get them to talk about the thing that they value, which is the having their own place, versus what kind of fool wants to move into your apartment in a month?
Right. I got it. That's very, very clear. So if you're spotting this, just get them to talk. Open-ended questions. Do not say anything that makes them defend. So interesting. I can look backwards now and see as a parent several mistakes that I made.
Because as parents too, Mel, we're so quick in there to want to protect our kids. I think nowhere else do we see that reactive, like bad. And it's almost like you can feel the clenching in yourself of saying, well, talk to me about this friendship. And inside you're like, leave them. I hope you never talk to them again. But you can't, because everybody, when they're ambivalent about something and we raise the thing that they're ambivalent about as being bad, their reactive response is to defend that thing because they're ambivalent.
It makes a lot of sense. What I've learned in the last couple years about marriage, and my husband and I, as you now know, have been married for 26 years. We've been together for 28 years. We started seeing a marriage counselor, a therapist, whatever you call him. He's amazing. Dr. Cooper. I love this man. Thank you, Dr. Cooper, if you're listening. I want to share with you kind of 6 observations that I have from my personal experience about why it matters, why it's important to work on it, and what you need to do if you do want to repair a relationship that's broken, or you want to improve and continue to grow together. So the first thing is you have to be intentional and say to yourself, I am going to turn this around. I'm going to make it better. Because there's no half-assing your marriage. You have to decide to make it better. Wishing it were better is what you're already doing. And it's very different than committing to make it better. Nothing in life is going to change until you make a decision to change it. And then you have to schedule in what you're doing with your partner to change it. And see, I look at marriage as this sort of like living thing. It's like a container in which you and your partner either grow or you wither and dry. I know that sounds like brutal and dramatic, but it's true. And if your marriage or your friendship matters to you, make it a fucking priority. It's really simple. If you want anything to grow, I mean, this is common sense. You got to care for it. You have to tend to it. You got to water it with kindness, with interest, with support. You have to tend to both your and your partner's ongoing growth. I mean, it's critical to your marriage. And I've said this a bazillion times, and I'm going to keep reminding you, our marriage is not perfect. It's not the ideal. It is ideal for us. And I've already shared with you that there were years that are wonderful, where we were wonderful to each other, where we were together all the time and investing in each other's growth and growing together. And then there were those years that sucked. We caused each other a lot of pain. And I want you to view the painful stuff in a relationship like weeds in a garden. Over time, if you're not careful, those weeds, they fucking take over. So do not ignore the little shitty stuff because weeds, they start out as this tiny little thing. And then have you ever noticed you like go away from your garden for a couple days and it rains and then the sun comes out and these teeny little weeds are like 5 feet tall? That's the little shitty, irritating stuff. Talk about it. Ask for what you need. Clear the air. Do not harbor resentment. And I'm telling you, therapy, if you can afford it, get yourself to therapy. It is a gift. Chris and I were already talking to an individual therapist, but that's not working on your marriage, by the way. That's working on yourself. And you should work on yourself. But it wasn't until we came together and made it a priority that things really started to shift. And one of the things that I love about talking to a therapist is that for me, I get more out of a 45-minute call with a therapist. We have never met our therapist in person. We do the entire thing virtually. But hitting the pause button every other week to truly unpack something that happened between the two of us, listen to one another. That's the hard part for me, I'm learning. To learn about one another. This is better than any damn date night could ever be. Because we're not just like going out and having time alone, we're actually investing in our growth. That's very different than having a steak and a bottle of wine. Like we're digging out the weeds in our relationships so that things can blossom and bloom so that when we do go out for that meal and that night out, it's actually more than just a dinner date. It's something that has real depth to it. So for you, if you can't afford therapy, I totally get it, but I totally understand. I have been in that place in my life. There are free online courses you can take together. There are books that you could read together. In fact, the episode that we just released, Dr. Nicola Pera, her brand new workbook, How to Meet Yourself, is a guided journey through knowing yourself better. You could use that. $25. Use that to make your marriage better. So there are things that you can do if you get intentional. So, number 2, this is also something that is critical. It seems like common sense, but you got to do it. You got to develop a genuine sense of interest again in the person. You were interested when you first met them. Remember that? But I bet along the way, you started to decide, oh, I know everything I know about this stupid person. Ugh, there they go again. Eye roll. Well, in therapy, I learned a lot about Chris that I didn't know. And I'm going to say it again. In therapy, I learned a lot about my husband that I didn't know. And I'm talking 24 years into marriage, things that I didn't know. I'm not talking about deep, dark secrets. I'm talking about the way that his thoughts and his feelings impact him. And like, for example, I had no idea how traumatized Chris was by his childhood because it wasn't like anything horrific happened to him. And his mom is one of my closest friends, but he was a latchkey kid. His parents were always working. His brothers were way older. Nobody was ever around. And so it was this sort of slow death march of isolation and feeling constantly alone. His experience was when I get home, nobody's there. When I play baseball, nobody shows up. That if I ask for something, I get teased. Nobody listens. So he stopped asking. In fact, he stopped asking to such a degree that he used to have a nickname in his family. When he was little, you know what they called my husband? The Monument. You want to know why? Because he didn't talk for 2 years. And everybody laughs about it. It was like some big joke. And the truth is, it's actually really sad. I mean, they laughed about it because nobody knew any better. And because he was just a little kid that felt like he was unseen and wasn't worthy of love, his needs didn't matter. He didn't know how to ask, or it just shut him down even more. And so I learned that part of the reason why he never asked for anything is because his experience growing up is that nobody gave a shit. And that helped me go from being annoyed at how quiet he is to really wanting to help support him. Because the fact is, he isn't the most effusive person. He's not the hardy har har guy. He's a deep thinker. And being interested, yes, it means be interested in somebody's hobbies. Be interested in what happened to them. Be interested in what they're saying. But it also means be interested in learning more about them as a human being. And we're all guilty of assuming we know someone just because we've known them for a long time. So, starting today, here's how you can apply this. Assume, starting today, that you don't know a lot about the person that you're with, that there's a whole part of them to discover. And I'm not talking about some deep, dark secret. I'm just talking about how they feel, how their childhood impacted them. Just think about yourself for a minute. When I think about how much I've changed, my God, in the last 4 years, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, I've lived that in my own mind and body. Unless you talk about it and listen to each other, you're not going to know that. I can give you another example of how little we know about each other. So, when I was hosting this daytime talk show, we did an episode where Chris was on, and there was this like marriage expert relationship person. And Chris revealed on national television that when it comes to being intimate, he prefers to have sex in the morning. I had been married to the guy for 22 years. I had no idea that's what he preferred. So, you're not going to really get connected to someone unless you're interested in learning more about them. So, ask more questions, be more curious. And that interest also means be loud and celebratory. I've been working on this. I mean, Chris, as he's leading his men's retreat called Soul Degree, I'm cheering for him. As he is pursuing a master's in spiritual psychology, I am rooting for him. As he is studying and getting a certificate to be a death doula, I am like clearing the schedule, making sure he's got time to do that. As he is pursuing a certification to do integration therapy for the new psychedelic modalities, I'm like all in. Him feeling supported and celebrated, that makes him know that I'm not only interested, but that I love him enough to be supportive in the things that he wants to do. And of course, he is cheering loud for me. And this isn't just obvious, this is also researched. Celebrating and sharing wins is critical. It's probably one of the reasons why you're roommates. You need to start pointing out what's going right instead of griping about the shit that's going wrong. Researchers from UCLA discovered that the single most crucial factor in tightening or destroying a bond that you have with your partner is how you react to good news in one another's lives. How you react to good news, based on research, way more important than how you react to any bad news. And here's why. You see, researchers found that celebrating your partner gives your partner an emotional lift. Whereas playing down big news, like, oh, that's okay, it leaves a lasting chill. And so you can start implementing that practice immediately. The next time your partner has something good happen, big or small, celebrate that shit. Show them how proud you are. Give them a high five, hug them. And if they don't have something amazing going on, freaking call it out. Thank you for taking the dog out. Thank you for doing this. The small things really matter because when they're ignored, those small things become weeds and resentment that grow and that separate the two of you. Now, the third thing, we did an entire episode on this. I call it Get on the Fun Bus. I'm serious. In therapy, one thing that I said over and over to Chris is this: our life is too serious, man. I am so sick and tired of talking about all this serious shit. I am tired of the problems. I am tired of just feeling like life is a grind. We need to have more fucking fun. And the thing about fun, and we talked about this on the episode about having fun with your family around the holidays, is you're not having fun unless you plan to have fun. I think we all make the mistake of thinking that, oh, fun has to be spontaneous. No. When you were little, your parents planned all the fun shit you did. And so you got to get serious about inserting fun again. In fact, I want to share a story with you. This is how important this is and how this simple concept infuses a dead relationship with new energy. It infuses that roommate syndrome that you may be feeling with this new rhythm and fun that can happen. Instead of that slow quitting, you can pick up the fun again and start to reinvest in each other. And I'm telling you right now, the more that you can bring fun back into your relationship, just like you did when you were dating in the beginning, remember those days? There's a reason why dating is fun because you're planning fun things to do. Just this past weekend, we had flown from southern Vermont to Northern California to go to a business meeting. And we had 90 minutes before we had to get to the start of this business meeting. And as we're driving from the San Francisco airport, I'm like, oh my God, have you ever seen the Redwood Forest? I think Muir Woods is right here. Neither one of us had never been there. So we pull off the highway. It is 4:15 at night. The Muir Woods National Forest is closing in 45 minutes. There is a dark, looming rain cloud coming, and it looks like it's about to rain horizontally. We drive straight to Muir Woods with 30 minutes to spare. We were the only ones there. It was so fun. And there were this dark, cloudy sky, so it felt like we were in a Hobbit movie. We hadn't planned it. It was so fun. And it reminded me we need to do more of that. So, the fastest way to create more energy, go see a great movie. Go exercise or hike together. Take dancing lessons. Cook something new. Check out a concert. Head to a theme park. Ride a roller coaster. Go skinny dipping. It doesn't matter what you do. Do something that you used to do when you were dating. Just make it fun. And what if your partner doesn't want to do any of these fun things? Total bump on the log. All right. Well, when we come back, I have somebody who's struggling with that, and we're going to hear her question next. All right, welcome back. I'm Mel Robbins, and we're talking about the things that I have learned after being married for 26 years and being in and working with a marriage therapist with my husband for the past 2 years. And so we've covered a couple of them, and now I want to address a question that I am getting a lot. And this one comes from a listener named Jen.
Hey Mel, it's Jen. How do we continue to move forward through the change process with a partner who's not willing to move forward too, or at least encourage you? There's a huge gap coming, and it's really scary. Thanks so much, Mel. We appreciate everything that you do.
You know, I can kind of hear the fear in your voice, Jen. It is scary when you get to a point where you realize that you've grown apart from somebody that you used to know. But first, remember, if underneath all that you still truly love this person and you're willing to work on it, you can absolutely make it better. And it's worth doing the work on. But your question is something that I get a lot. Your partner's not encouraging you, and your partner sounds like doesn't want to do the work. So I'm going to address this, and I want to just make sure that there are two aspects to this question of your partner not wanting to move forward, not wanting to join you, not encouraging you. So there is two situations where that's true, and one of them is not that big of a deal, and one of them is a really big deal. So if you're with somebody that doesn't want to do the things that you want to do. They're not interested in having fun. For example, like let's say my husband really wanted to go to a dude ranch. I personally have zero interest in doing that. I do not want to move forward with that idea. I once went to a dude ranch to celebrate my dad's 70th birthday, and I got bucked off a horse and broke my leg and my tailbone. Not interested in that. However, it is important if you want to go the distance. I believe this so much that you are able to do things on your own and you are supported in that. So it's very different to say that your partner doesn't want to be the plus one in your professional dancing career, or they don't want to be the plus one in your desire to scale Mount Kilimanjaro. That's cool. You should pursue things separately from one another. You should have friends that you go off and do things with. You should have goals and hobbies that are yours alone. But I don't think that's what you're asking. I think what you're asking is what do I do if I want to work on this, but my husband will not go to therapy? My husband will not address the problems. My partner or wife will not do the work. If you're in that situation where you're willing and you love this person and they refuse to go to therapy, it's not going to work. You can go to therapy alone, but you will not be working on your marriage. You'll be working on yourself. And yes, therapy will change you for the better. And it might just change some of your habits and your mindset. So that changes the dynamic in your marriage. But to me, that's really a marriage of enduring. It's a marriage that you're surviving because you're with somebody that's not willing to meet you halfway. And when you're in a relationship and the other person won't work on it, what's going to happen is, and I've seen this happen over and over and over again, is the one person who's willing to go to therapy, who's willing to look in the mirror, who's willing to work on themselves, you know what they tend to do? They work themselves to a new level and right on out of that marriage. That's what happens. Because if you don't continue to grow with somebody, you're going to grow to resent them. And that is a scary place. But my only kind of recommendation is you got to keep asking. You got to work on yourself. And at some point, there will become a time where you're going to say, it's not negotiable. In order for me to stay in this relationship, you have to be able to do X, Y, Z. And if you can't do those things, then I can't stay in this because you're not willing to work on it. And I hope it doesn't come to that. Now, another thing that has made a big difference in our relationship in the last couple of years, bringing us much closer together, is reversing roles. So, this is not some sort of like thing you're going to do in the bedroom, although you can. This is not the thing that I'm referring to, although maybe Chris and I should try that. But what I'm talking about is sort of the default roles that you both play in your relationship. So I used to be the person, and this is probably due to my anxiety, where I was the one that was always planning everything. I would pick the restaurants, I'd set the agenda, I would bulldoze the path forward. And here's what I learned in therapy, that in me moving so fast all the time and always taking control, it created two major problems. Problem number one, Chris had zero room to step in and take the lead and take care of me. And the more I just did it, I just took care of it, I just picked the restaurant, da, 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 the more I made Chris feel really concerned that if he tried to do those things, I wouldn't like what he did. And so my busyness, my proactiveness, my anxiety about it, my just get it done, get it done, get it done, get it done, it literally made his silence and his thinking worse because there was no room for him to do anything. And second, and here's where the real kicker came, I started to feel like everything was always up to me. And that if I didn't do it, nobody would do it. And, it's funny because this dynamic that I created because of my sort of anxious and go getter nature literally was the reason why this happened. I would do everything and then be like, why the hell are you doing something? Why is it always me doing something? And then Chris would go like, well, because you're always doing something and I never have time to do something. And I would like to do something, but you've already done that thing. And so we were just locked in this. We were physically together, but having a massive disconnection in our emotional experience of being together. And that theme showed up over and over and over again in therapy. In fact, when Dr. Cooper said to us, you guys are great at transaction, you're sequestered emotionally. That's exactly what he meant. That you're great at doing all this shit, Mel. And you're great at doing all your shit, Chris, but you're in your own corners emotionally and you're not aware of how one another is feeling. So, how are we changing that? Well, there's a lot of slowing down, I'm learning, when you are changing a relationship for the better. Because what you're really changing in your relationship when you change it for the better is you are breaking apart the old patterns and you are replacing them with new ways of showing up. And so, again, it's like habits that you need to break and replace and a muscle that you need to rep. And so, me personally, I'm working on stepping back instead of just racing ahead full throttle. And I am giving Chris the lead on planning and organizing. I mean, the man does design and lead men's retreats for crying out loud. So, for example, when our anniversary came up, normally I would pick what we're going to do. I would do all this kind of stuff. And, I also noticed that I have this propensity to be like, oh, no, that's okay. You don't have to get anything. Oh, no, 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 I don't need anything. Let's not do presents this year. And then I'd be pissed off that there were no presents. So the poor guy couldn't win. I told you I was the asshole in this relationship. So I said to Chris, why don't you just take the reins? Don't even tell me what we're doing. And it was incredible. He surprised me and booked this place that was literally less than an hour away from us in southern Vermont. We took a few days off to just unplug and eat phenomenal food and sleep without the dog waking us up at 5:30 in the morning. And Chris surprised me. It was on our 26th wedding anniversary. On that first night with this stunning ring and vows that he had written out. And, the ring was really insane because Chris had not given me a piece of jewelry that he had picked out and bought for me since our engagement ring. I'm going to say that again. In 26 years, Chris had not picked out and given me a piece of jewelry since our engagement ring. I had always pointed things out and told him what to get and again, managed that. And what had happened is a year ago, we were deep in therapy and I was out in Vegas to give a speech and Chris had come with me. And as a lark, one night before we were about to pull into the elevators at the hotel, we walked into this jewelry store and I tried on this crazy ring. And little did I know, Chris had called the store after we left Vegas, got the details, and had a jeweler back home make it. And he had been holding on to it for months, waiting for the right time to give it to me. Now, I, of course, had nothing to give to him. But it was incredible. And, after that experience, I nicknamed him the trip leader because I realized that the moments in life that I feel the safest and the most in love with him are not when he's giving me jewelry, it's when he's the leader. He's blazing the trail when we're hiking, he's setting up camp when we're camping. He is really doing what he does best, which ironically is planning. In fact, he's so good at it, I might never, ever plan a thing again. And one other thing I want to say about that when our 25th wedding anniversary hit, things were so bad between us, we didn't do anything. I mean, imagine making it to 25 years and being in a state in your marriage where you're like, I don't even feel like celebrating. We have so much work to do to find our way back to one another after all the shit that we have been through these past couple years and how far apart we feel from one another and how much resentment has built up. And for him, how much shame and regret. And for me, shame and regret too, that on our 25th wedding anniversary, we didn't do anything. We didn't celebrate. We didn't post about it. We didn't toast. We just let the day come and we let the day go. And so for us to get to a point a year later where he and I have been working hard to truly address the things that went sideways and to hear one another and to be interested in one another's experience and feelings and be interested in showing up and changing, that's what we were actually celebrating. That's why there were new vows. And that's what's possible when both of you are willing to do the work. And so the fifth thing is you got to ask for what you need. It's taken me 20 some years to just ask for what I need. This is a novel idea, but instead of being pissed off at your partner, why not just ask for what you need? It's a lot easier than being angry and annoyed all the time. And I think a lot of us get into trouble. This is that sort of slow, quiet quitting that I was talking about, because we show up in a relationship and we expect our partner to behave the same way we wish they would. And we don't ever fully communicate what we actually need. And they don't ever fully communicate what they need. I gave you the example of us being married for 20 years and me not even knowing that Chris prefers to be intimate in the morning. Never talked about it. Like that's dumb. Why not just talk about it? It just is so obvious. I'll give you another example. I love flowers. I mean, I love, love, love flowers. I have parents that turned a wooded plot of land in suburban West Michigan into this gorgeous, gorgeous perennial garden. And I just love flowers. It reminds me of my childhood. I love taking care of them. I love growing them. And I love buying myself flowers. Nothing makes me happier than going to the grocery store. And if I see a little bouquet of tulips or daffodils, I mean, I'm talking $3, $4. You don't have to like buy the roses. I just love having fresh flowers in my house. And when Chris goes to the grocery store and he buys a bundle of tulips for me, it's like, oh my God, you were thinking about me and you know this about me. It took me a long time to tell Chris that. Do you know what was happening instead? For years, when I would travel, I would take off on a Monday to go give a bunch of speeches. I'd return home on a Friday, like a lot of you do that travel for work, that are road warriors out there. And I would come home, and you know what would be on the kitchen counter when I got home? A vase full of the dead flowers that I had bought for myself that nobody in the family had bothered to pull out of the vase while I was gone. And when I would walk in and see those dead flowers, that was a sign to me that nobody even thought about me while I was gone. Nobody was expecting me to come home tonight. Nobody was excited for me to come home. And so one day I said to Chris, you know, it would mean a lot to me if when I come home from a business trip, or hell, whenever you go to the grocery store, if you just picked up flowers. Because when I see, I'm talking grocery store flowers, people. I'm not talking go to the florist. I'm saying the bare minimum. When there's a little bundle of tulips sitting in a plastic vase on the counter or a mason jar, it makes me know that you're thinking of me. And I'll tell you, that's all it took. Every time the man goes to the grocery store, he returns with flowers, and it puts the biggest freaking smile on my face. So ask. Instead of punishing somebody, instead of quietly quitting, get loud about what you want. And in return, ask your partner to get loud about what they need from you. Don't assume that you know your partner's love language or what they wish that you were doing. Just ask them and start doing it. And finally, this is a big one. Assume good intent. One of the things that I've learned about my husband, Chris, it's been a reminder, really. And this is one of those things that happens when you really slow down and you get present with the person, whether it's your spouse or your partner or a friend, is that my husband's just like, he's just like a really nice guy. There's not a mean bone in Christopher Robin's body. And I get so worked up in my own shit that I forget that. I just forget that he's not out to be an asshole. He's not trying to screw me over. He's not some dickhead that's doing the. He's just a nice guy who's doing his best. And see, I think we forget that. If you deep down still love the person that you're with, but there's all this crap that's built up, find your way to anchor there. Assume good intent. Assume that they didn't mean to use that tone of voice, that they didn't mean to frustrate you, that they didn't mean to fail at whatever they failed at, that they didn't mean. Assume good intent. Remember the person that you fell in love with, because I believe that person is still deep down in there. But any relationship, whether it's a friendship or a family relationship or a love relationship that goes the distance, there's shit that builds up. But the person who they are at their core, that doesn't change. That doesn't change. And so if your response to me saying, assume good intent is, oh, Christ, Mel. I mean, you should like, and you're starting to make a case about the person you're with, there's your answer. Get out. If you can't even admit that at their core, this is a good person, this is a nice person, then get out, because you're with somebody that's not a nice person. You're more committed to making your case and being right about this than you are about seeing something deeper that's worth working for. And to me, that's the bottom line, because that's what I've learned through these past challenging years and at times very painful changes in years that we've been through. That if you're both willing to look a little deeper and remind yourself of why you loved him in the first place, if you're both willing to look in the mirror and work on yourselves and your relationship, you can work through anything. You really can. You can get through some horrific things. You can get through things that seem insurmountable, whether it is addiction or the death of a loved one or cheating or bankruptcy. You can get through all kinds of things if you're both willing to work on yourselves and your relationship. If you're willing to remember that deep down, you're with somebody that is a good person at heart that maybe lost their way, that your relationship is a living, breathing, organic thing, a place where you're either going to grow or you're going to wither and die. You got to care for it. You got to tend to it. You got to shower it with kindness and genuine interest and support. And please, dear God, can we start having some fucking fun? I mean, let's just stop waiting for another couple to invite you over and start throwing some dinner parties and some dance parties and some playlists and have some fun. Like maybe it's that we've all gotten a little too serious. Save the serious talk for your therapy sessions and bring the fun to the rest of your life. Bring your inner life to the surface. And I'm telling you, your connection will not only grow, but it will also grow strong. And in case no one else tells you today, I hope that your partner or your friend tells you this, but in case they don't, I'm going to tell you, I love you and I believe in you. And I believe in your ability to create a better life and better relationships. And how about you start putting what I just shared with you to work right now? I want to start sort of at the beginning of the spectrum. So you receive so many people from around the world every day, and so do I, writing in because they can't find love, because they have a string of relationships that have failed, and they have a story about needing to find love, about I can't find love, about, and I as a mom, having had two daughters who are now in really great relationships, seeing them chase it, seeing them like attach their value around somebody else, picking them, loving them. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Where do you begin when it comes to building this new skill around how you think about love? Where would you tell somebody? Is it rule number one?
It is rule number one in the book, but I think you've just brought out a beautiful point that I want to respond to. And it's that we all have a story that we're writing about love. And the interesting thing is that our mind makes us fiction writers. And we're writing our own fictional version of what our love story looks like. And it changes every single day. One day we feel like anyone would be lucky to have us. But then there's months that go by when we feel we're completely unlovable and we're not enough. And I think it's really interesting because we both know this, that the story you're saying to yourself, the story you're telling yourself naturally becomes your reality because you're looking for the facts. You're looking for those truths in your life. So if you think to yourself, no one's attracted to me right now, you're now going around looking for how many people are not attracted to you and don't look at you. It's almost like when you make a decision to say, I'm thinking about buying this brand of car, or I'm thinking about buying this brand of whatever it may be. Now you see that brand everywhere, you hear it everywhere.
Right.
It's not that suddenly everyone just started buying that car on the streets or buying that product or brand, but you see it everywhere because it's at the forefront of your consciousness. And so if the story is, I'm not good enough, I'm not ready, and I'm unlovable, which is a very true and real story of the people that are writing in for us, that unfortunately is what you're going to perpetuate. And that's why rule one is about what you do alone. Because if you're waiting for someone to love you, to believe you're lovable, that means you're saying that the day they change their mind, you're now immediately unlovable. And so you're deciding whether you're lovable or not based on whether someone else thinks you're worthy of love. And I think that that sets us up for a lot of pain, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. There's this beautiful thought from Paul Tillich, and he talks about how in the English language, we have two words for being alone, but we only talk about one of them. And that word is loneliness. I'm lonely. I feel alone. It's been a lonely day. It's been a lonely year. I'm experiencing loneliness. But we never use the other word. And the other word is solitude. It's just not used in our vocabulary. And he says that loneliness is the weakness of being alone. And solitude is the glory, or as I say, the strength of being alone. And what I want people to understand is that when you take the time on your own to do three things, the first thing is you have to learn about yourself. You have to learn what you like, what you don't like, what experiences you're into, what you're not into, because what we don't realize is when you start dating someone, you adopt all of their likes and dislikes only in a few years to feel like you don't know who you are anymore.
Right.
And you lose yourself.
Well, this is going to sound like a dumb question, but I have to ask it.
Yeah.
How the hell do you figure out what you like?
No,
No, I'm not.
So,
I'm
yeah,
serious.
it's a good
Like
question.
if you've
yeah.
always been somebody.
Yeah.
So let's role play.
No, let's
You're
do
my
it.
life coach.
Yeah.
Okay. My parents are divorced. I have had terrible relationships through high school and college, Jay. And the last person I was with cheated on me. And every time I go out to the bars with my friends, all my friends get approached by people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who I like. How
Yeah.
do I find love? Like, how
Yes.
to coach me?
So first mistake, and
Yes.
I wouldn't say this in a coaching session, but to speed it up for us, first mistake, you're already thinking it's about what do you like about the partner. I'm saying what do you like about yourself?
And where
What
do
do
you
you like
start
in
if
your
you
own life?
don't know
So very
yourself?
simple. When you go out for a dinner,
Uh-huh.
as soon as you get back, you know whether you like the food at that restaurant or not, don't you?
Yes.
If you went out for a burrito, you know whether you like it or not. If you went out for Italian, you know whether you like it or not. How about we start doing that with people, places, and projects? How about we start reflecting when we take on a project at work? After we complete it, let's sit there and reflect. Don't reflect while you're doing it, because that can often be misleading. Sometimes a piece of food comes out and it looks awkward or uncomfortable or it's a weird color. Then you try it and it's incredible. So it's only by trying do we know. And so after you finish a project at work, did I like it or not? What did I like about it? What didn't I like about it? Was that my comfort or was that my discomfort? 3 questions, really easy. Did I like it or not? What did I like about it or not like about it? And what I didn't like about it, was that just because it was uncomfortable? Or is it because I actually found it terrible? And if you did that with people, groups you spend time with, so many of us never change our friends over a decade because we never reflected when we left. You'd never go back to a restaurant if you had a bad experience.
That's true.
But you keep going back to the same person.
Oh my God, we crawl back.
We crawl
Jay,
back.
we beg them back in our
Because
lives.
we never took that time to reflect because it was always about them. We make it about them. So I'll give you
Ooh,
a
I
relation.
love. Okay, so stop. I want to
Yes.
make sure everybody just heard that. Skill number 1, rule number 1: let yourself be alone. But what I want to say is, this was the huge paradigm shift for me. So much of us are chasing and seeking love. And step 1 that I just got from you is you got to make it about yourself and not about the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And until you understand the things you love and the things that make you come alive when you're alone, that's the beginning of this.
Yeah, we keep making lists of what we want in someone else, right? We keep making a list of, I want them to be kind, I want them to be tall, I want them. So all of our energy is being pointed outwards rather than saying, who am I becoming? Who am I striving to grow into? What is it that I'm passionate about? When you're focused on all of that, all of a sudden you feel you have so much more to offer in a relationship. You walk into it recognizing that someone would be fortunate to be with you and you'd be fortunate to be with them because you have something to share. I think most of us, we walk into relationships because we're scared of being alone. And when we do that, studies show we do 3 things. If you're feeling alone, if you're scared of being alone and single and you're going into a relationship because of that fear, research shows 3 things happen. The first thing is you're guaranteed to settle for less than you deserve. Guaranteed. The second thing is you're more likely to be dependent on that person because you think they're out of your league. And so now you'll become, do, mold, fold become anything they want you to be. And the third is you're going to be scared to leave them because being with them in your mind is better than being alone. And so you think about all of us who've been in that situation before. And by the way, it's not your fault.
Have you
Movies
been
have
in that
done this.
situation before?
I have been in a situation before many times in my teens
Yeah.
where I, sadly, and I regret this, I showed love to people in order for them to validate me. So it wasn't that I didn't like them, but I showed them more extreme forms of passion and love because I thought they'd say, Jay, that's amazing. You're the best person I've ever been with. I just wanted to hear those words.
Yeah.
And that comes back from my childhood trauma of being bullied for being overweight, for being bullied for being Indian, for having a group of girls who lined up next to my football match when I was 11 years old shouting, she's out of your league.
What?
Yeah. So I was 11 years old in primary school or elementary school, as you say in the US. And there was one girl in school that everyone had a crush on, right? You're 11 years old. And there was one girl that every guy had a crush on. And all the guys knew and all the girls knew, but she didn't know we had a crush on her. And one day I came in late from, I think, a doctor's appointment or something like that. And everyone was laughing when I came in. And I didn't know what they were laughing about. So I sat down and everyone was giggling at me and pointing at me. And I was thinking, what's going on here? And then one of my friends slipped me a note. And the note, I opened it and it said, she knows. And I was like, she knows what? I realized that all the guys and all the girls had told her that the only person in the class that had a crush on her was me. And I was considered one of the least desirable people in my class because of my weight and the color of my skin. And so for the rest of that week, all the girls bullied me, standing behind. Literally, we're playing football. When I say football, I mean soccer, but
Right.
we're playing football, and I was a goalkeeper because that was the only position I'd be allowed to play. And the girls lined up behind the goal and shouted out, she's out of your league. I can't believe you thought you could get her. I can't believe that you thought she could be with you. And I realized that that trauma, that experience transferred over to my teens, when now all I wanted was a girl to say, you're the best, you're amazing, you're incredible, because of that other statement I'd heard all those years before.
You know, it's amazing how we have these experiences and it just blocks our ability to let love in because we don't believe that we're worth it.
Yeah.
That also, I'm realizing, impacted how you first showed up when you started dating your wife, Roddy.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
can we talk about that?
Yeah,
Because, you know, I know
absolutely.
that you were in business school when you first heard a monk speak at the age of 18 and you felt the call to become a monk. And did you meet Roddy before you became a monk, or how did you guys meet?
Yeah. So going back to that moment, and then I'll dive into that question. I feel like you spend your life seeking validation.
Mm-hmm.
You then don't get it in the way you wanted it, and then you finally decide you have to validate yourself.
Yes.
And that journey can be 10 years, 20 years, or even 50 years. And so the shorter we make that journey, the better it is. I met the monks when I was 18 years old, and I met Radhi just before, 6 months before I was about to go and become a monk. So my final year of university. And the way we met was I was using the last 6 months, I would use all my weekends to go to the temple in my local area to train and, to be honest, just to stay out of trouble, because I was like, if I'm at university during my weekends, I'm going to get into trouble. So I need to go and practice. And I was asked to show a lady, came in one day, she was around my mom's age, and I was asked to show her around to do some services and some rituals at the temple. I've never been asked to do this before this day. I've never been asked to do it again. And at the end of it, she said to me, she said, I have a daughter that I'd love to introduce to you. I'd love for her to meet someone who's into spirituality and meditation. She's probably around your age. And I said, well, I'm so sorry. I'm going to go off and become a monk, but I'd introduce her to my sister. So that woman that I'd met happened to be Radhi's mom. And she brought Radhi in to meet me, and I introduced her to my sister. And I saw Radhi. I probably exchanged like 3 words with her. I thought she was stunning and attractive and beautiful, hence what I was saying about finding her attractive. But in my head, I was like, no, I'm training to be a monk. I need to stay focused. Like, don't worry about it. And so her and my sister became friends. When I came back from the monastery, her and my sister had become really close. Radhi was at my house all the time. My sister was at hers all the time. And then my sister was our middle person, our wing person, who helped us get the message across. So we met before, and it was 4 years from, and then I found out that her mother that day prayed that her daughter would find someone like me. And I found that out many years later. And now I know she hates me because we moved to LA. So
Oh, your mother-in-law hates
yeah,
you.
my mother-in-law hates me because we moved to LA.
So you mentioned though that you've made mistakes
Yeah,
in love, and I want to just connect that experience of being bullied as a kid, and then feeling like if you just really get somebody to love you back,
hmm
then you're going to feel worthy
hmm
for how you showed up in the beginning with your now wife.
hmm Yeah, so I realized that I don't. I think another big thing for me was chasing the approval of a male figure. My dad was quite aloof when I was growing up, and I've always considered my dad to be more of a friend than a father. And even till this day, my dad's my friend. I can always talk to him, but it was my mom who taught me how to like shave my beard, and like that's why I have great grooming habits.
I
Like
was going to say, is that why you
take
still
care
have
of
a
my
beard? Did she
skin.
not
Yeah,
do a
yeah.
good job with
No,
that?
yeah,
I'm just
exactly.
kidding.
But my mom taught me how to take care of my skin. Like my mom was the one who was teaching me and guiding me through all the things that you'd think a dad would do. And what was really interesting about that is I think the monks became my first male role models.
Mm.
And I was looking for them to validate me. Now, the interesting thing when you're trying to get validated by monks is they don't validate you. They're just trying to teach you the truth. And so that's when I learned to validate myself during that time. And it was really powerful. But here's the interesting thing. We're conditioned so deeply.
Mm.
We've watched so many movies. We've listened to so many songs. We've seen so many cliches and examples of what love truly is that we snap back into those habits as soon as we're back. So as soon as I came back from the monastery and I started dating Radhi around 6 months later, I snapped back into all my old habits because that's how strong it is. So if anyone ever feels compelled and you keep thinking, I keep dating the same person again and again, I don't know what's
Yes.
wrong with me.
Yes.
Like,
What is wrong with us, Jay?
Well, that's the thing. It's that the conditioning of the gifts and gaps that our parents left become the map of how we look for love. So if our parents gave us gifts, we're looking for people who give us those same gifts. If your parents were present, if they turned up to your dance recital, if they turned up to your soccer game, you now are looking for someone who's forever present. Unlikely as an adult. That's not always going to happen. And if your parents left gaps, maybe they didn't believe in you. Maybe they criticized you. Maybe they compared you to a sibling or a family member or a cousin. Now you have that gap and you're hoping someone else is going to fill it. And what I learned during my time as a monk was whatever you want from someone else, first give it to yourself. If you're looking for compliments from someone else, give it to yourself first. If you're looking for understanding from someone else, understand yourself first. And if you're looking for validation and affection, do that for yourself first. That's why I love your high five habit. Like it's perfect, right? The reason why it works is you're asking everyone to look in the mirror every morning and give themselves exactly what they need from the day. And they can give it to themselves in the mirror. You're high-fiving yourself. Like that is a perfect demonstration of how deeply you believe in this.
I'm going to ask Jay to do something in a minute because he's in the middle of explaining rule number 2, which is don't ignore your karma.
Yeah.
And you have this beautiful meditation, but I just want to offer up something to someone who may be listening and feeling like, but. One of the most simple exercises you could ever do if you feel like you just can't break through in this area of being in a healthy relationship or truly finding or attracting love with the right person. Just write down on a piece of paper everything you're looking for and then be that person yourself. And something funny happens. You're like actually looking for things that are a void. And if you be those things for yourself, that person starts to show up. But Jay has an even deeper tool. You have this younger self meditation. Would you be willing to just walk us through that meditation for just even a minute of
Yeah.
what that is like?
Yeah. Eyes closed?
Yeah.
Amazing. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd love to do that. I think so. For anyone who's doing this, I'm just adding a disclaimer that this can be emotive, it can be challenging. And so please do this when you're in a safe space, when you are feeling more steady and you're feeling at ease. And maybe do it when you can follow it up with a bit of journaling or a bit of moment of reflection, and maybe even a conversation with a partner or a friend or someone that you trust. And so just to give that before we dive in. But I just want everyone to gently and softly close their eyes and just take a moment to be present with your breath, the seat or bed or floor beneath you, and whatever sounds are in your environment. I want you to visualize yourself meeting your 13-year-old self. Visualize their face. Visualize what you were probably wearing. Visualize yourself at that age. And as you get closer, give them a warm, loving embrace. And now, I want you to share with your younger self everything you wish you heard at that age. Everything you wish you were told. You can give it to them right now. You are enough. You're worthy of love. You have what it takes, whatever it may be for you. Shower them with all the love that you deserve then and now. And now ask them what wisdom or insight they have for you. Just listen carefully, and if nothing comes up immediately, allow it to arise even after this meditation, tomorrow or this week. What advice or insight or words does your younger self have for you? Once again, give them a warm, loving embrace, all the love, all the connection, and know that that inner child is forever within you, and you can revisit them, shower them with love whenever you like. And when you're ready, you can gently and softly open your eyes and just be present.
Thank you.
Thank you for
That's beautiful.
allowing us that space.
I literally, do you mind if I share? Emma?
Please, I'd love to hear if you're
I,
so willing to.
Yeah, I saw myself standing there with this Dorothy Hamill haircut, which was that famous figure skater. Let me tell you, the 13-year-old Mel Robbins does not look like the average 13-year-old today.
That's why I picked that awkward age. Like, no one at 13, I don't think there's anyone who is.
Oh man, and I've got this like Benetton sweater on. I don't know why I'm
I
focused
love
on the
it.
clothes,
That's
but
good. No, no, that's really good visualization. Like the more, I mean, if we had longer, and as I describe in the book, the more detailed, the better. That's
yes,
great. That's
yes.
fantastic. Yeah.
So Dr. John and Julie Gottman, they are the most prominent researchers on the topic of love and relationships. And their research has found that couples who are happy, you know why they're happy? They know how to have fun together. Well, that extends to all relationships, particularly with your family. I know that the second that you walk into mom or dad's house, you feel like you're 8 years old again. I know the second that you're around your family, even though you love your brothers and sisters, there's the golden child, there's the middle child, there's the favorite. You fall right back into the old roles. Well, here's the thing about fun. Fun lessens the stress. Fun helps you sleep better. Fun makes you happier. It makes you smarter, and it strengthens your relationships when you're having fun with other people. And you know that this is true. And look, you aren't the only one. Here's how sad the topic of fun is. Researchers have a word to describe the fact that you and I are not having as much fun as we should. You want to hear the words? It's pretty sad. Researchers say that you and I are living in a fun drought. I mean, my mouth is not just dry. Apparently, my whole life is dry. 97% of us, according to the research, and that includes you and me, wish we had more fun. 60% of adults believe that their life is just way too grown up. I know I feel that way. Don't you wish you could go into a time machine and sit back at the kids' table again and be elbowing your cousins and laughing at all the adults? Well, that brings me to the next piece of research. 73% of us miss aspects of our childhood, like birthday parties or family celebrations. Let's just talk about your own family for a second. Forget about what your relationship is like right now. I want you to think back through time. What are the best memories that you have with your family? I guarantee you, what popped right into your mind were the fun times. When I think about my family, the Schneebergers, you know what I think about? I think about game night. I think about the fact that we love playing euchre and backgammon, and we always divide up into teams. And my mom and I are a great team because we love to smack talk, and then it's like the ladies against the guys. And we will play cards for hours. Cribbage, euchre. I just love those nights. And we laugh and we're competitive. Or I can think of like another memory that comes to mind for me is wiffle ball. When my little nephews were tiny, they're twins and they're 14 now and they're taller than I am. Well, I'd get out there when they were little and I would always have to drop out of the wiffle ball game because I haven't had my bladder surgery yet. And then everybody would laugh about how Aunt Mel just peed herself, ha, 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 ha. And they'd try to make me laugh, so I would pee myself. Or when we go visit my parents, my dad always rents a pontoon boat, and not just any pontoon boat. There is only one place on Muskegon Lake where you can rent a pontoon boat. This pontoon boat is like 30 years old. We have rented the same thing every year that we go back and visit. And this thing's like chugga, 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 chugga. And the last summer when we were back there that we rented it, it died in the middle of the lake. Honest to God. But it was a blast. You know, we laughed and laughed and laughed, and my dad had to wave down a boat and get a ride. It was a whole thing. But we always have fun. And I guarantee you, when I go back this summer, it'll be that same 31-year-old pontoon boat, and we'll all wonder if it will actually be able to have enough horsepower to do tubing. Now, on Chris's side of the family, when I think about memories there, it's always fun stuff too. Like how excited all 9 cousins were when they get together. And they would spend hours and hours and hours, particularly in the winter, building jumps on this huge hill that we live on. And then they would sled on it. And honestly, the last time they all did that, it's kind of sad. I bet it was about 15 years ago. Or another memory, we had this epic lip sync battle one Thanksgiving where all of not only Chris's family got together, but all of his cousins came too. And it was every family was a band. It was this incredible battle. Absolutely amazing. Do you know when that was? 13 years ago. So it begs the question, if you always remember the fun times, why aren't we having fun anymore? And so before I talk about how we're going to do that, I want to reveal the 3 big reasons why we aren't having fun, especially around the holidays. And these are reasons supported by the research. So the first reason why we fall into a fun drought is because of guilt. And this may sound weird, so let me explain it to you. I think it's been a hard few years for a lot of people. And maybe you or members of your family are having a hard time. And so what happens when somebody has just gone through a divorce, or maybe you've lost a loved one, or somebody just lost their job, or they're struggling, or whatever, you feel guilty prioritizing fun. I mean, if somebody that you love isn't going to be able to make it to the celebration, or somebody's passed away, don't feel guilty about having fun. Having fun honors that person. And so don't let guilt, or maybe we shouldn't have fun, or this has got to be serious. Do not let that guilt prevent you from bringing the fun this holiday season. Secondly, and I think this one's really important, you may have ideas for having fun with your family. Like maybe you heard me say we used to have these epic big lip sync battles, and you're like, oh, I'd love to do that. And then I guarantee you, you know what you felt? My family would never do that. And that's the second reason why we don't bring more fun. You're afraid you're going to get judged. Well, I can take care of that fear right now. You will get judged. Your family is going to tease you. Your family's going to roll your eyes. Your family will judge you when you show up with a huge armload of foam hats that you expect everybody to wear at the holiday table. Guess what? When you bring the poster board and the markers, when you bring the wiffle ball, when you bring the face paint, when you bring the karaoke machine, I want you to expect to be made fun of. You want to know why? Because that's your family. That's what we do. And you know what else? Who freaking cares? They're going to complain anyway. So you got a choice here. Do you want them to sit around and complain about relatives that aren't there, or about politics, or about the weather, or about how their back hurts? Or do you want them to complain about the foam hat that you brought that we're all now laughing at? You get to choose. And I'm going to ask you, please choose the fun. And here's the third reason why we don't have enough fun. I'm telling you. And this is the single most important reason. And it's dead simple. We don't plan for it. You and I are making a huge mistake. We think fun needs to be spontaneous. I get it. Fun was really spontaneous when you were a little kid, or at least you thought it was. But if you really stop and think about it, when you were a kid, all those fun moments, the adults planned. They planned the birthday parties. They planned the get-togethers. They invited your friends over for play dates. They bought the Legos and the puzzle. They turned on the fun movie. They popped the popcorn. And what I'm here to tell you is, now that you and I are adults, you and I need to plan those fun experiences for ourselves and the other adults around us. Don't just plan something fun for the kids this holiday. Plan something for everybody to do. So I have now opened the kimono, people. I have lifted up the skirt. I have shown up here. I don't even know what other metaphor to tell you. I'm just freestyling here with you right now on this holiday edition. The bottom line is, let's admit it. We're in a fun drought. Second, let's also admit we had been planning on showing up at the holiday gathering, hoping it was fun, and then just being critical when it's not. So here's what we're going to do. You and me, we're bringing the fun. And rule number one, stop focusing on all the logistics. Focus on the laughter. I'm not kidding about this. I want you to weave laughter into the logistics. If you did the work ahead of time to plan for fun and to make sure it's fun, it will be fun. And, you know, when I say don't just focus on the logistics, also focus on the laughter, I want to tell you a quick story. So we're hosting Thanksgiving this year, and my husband, thank God, is handling the logistics. And so he put together an email, and he, assigned all the things out that everybody was doing. And yeah, bring the dogs, and, bring a bathing suit, and ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba. And everybody replies back, excited to see you. And we're so excited to get together. And so now as the emails are starting to fly, I'm starting to feel excited. But everybody's just kind of commenting on the logistics. We'll be there Thursday. We'll be there Wednesday night. We're going to bring the dog, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, our son Oakley replies. And he replies in all caps, "People, we are going to destroy this feast!" Exclamation point. And I just laughed out loud. That could be you. Why not reply to the family logistics text chain with a hilarious GIF of somebody dancing with a turkey? Why not put in a hilarious photo of somebody in the family? Why not bring the fun? So don't just focus on the logistics. make sure you focus on the laughter too. Now, let's talk about step 2. How do you stop falling into the, oh, fun will just happen spontaneity category, and you fall into the, I'm going to make this fun thing happen category? Well, let's look at the research. People who are happy do things that make them happy. That's one of those studies where I'm like, yeah, duh. But then you're like, oh, no wonder I'm not happy. I'm not doing anything or prioritizing happiness. They work at things that make them happy. And it makes sense because when you try things that make you happier, you're a happier person. Well, guess what? The exact same research relates to fun. It's seriously so obvious, it's kind of stupid, but let's have some fun with it, right? Let's not be embarrassed. Your life becomes fun when you plan things that are fun to you, or even when normal things. You just bring a fun attitude like our son did to the email chain. All caps, exclamation, let's go, people. And on that note, I want to share a story with you about the power of bringing the fun. Okay? Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Thankfully, we have somebody in our family who's incredible at this. Our oldest daughter, Sawyer, who's 23 years old, this woman always brings the fun. I mean, she is always doing something really fun with her friends. I can give you a few examples. There was one year where she and her friends were out in Breckenridge, Colorado, and I was looking at the photos online, and they were out at bars in these colonial costumes, literally, like think Holly Hobby, bonnets, prairie dress, apron. They had gone on a bar crawl in costume, like looking like women from a colonial era, like Little House on the Prairie. It was such a riot that people all over Breckenridge were stopping them. They were featured on the Breckenridge Facebook page. People were taking photos with them. I mean, talk about bringing the fun. That's hilarious. I mean, I'd never think to order costumes and go on a themed bar crawl. Who does that? Well, apparently people who have fun do that. Another thing that she did recently is we had all of her college friends from Boston College up with their moms for a big mother-daughter weekend. And when we found out that one of the moms, who was a widow, had just gotten engaged to her boyfriend, Sawyer turned to me and said, let's throw a wedding. I'm like, throw a wedding? She's like, yeah, we're going to throw a wedding. And sure enough, impromptu, they made a sash for the mom. We made a veil out of a paper towel, like a long thing of paper towel, and flowers out of like foil. And then we blew bubbles, and we had her daughter, who was wearing this huge foam hat, walk her down the aisle in our living room. And then Sawyer it was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Why? She brought the fun. When she heard something, she leaned into it, and we just improv. It was just amazing. And she also did this repeatedly during quarantine. So quarantine was actually a really awesome time for our family once we got over the grieving and we settled into the routine of being together, because our kids brought the fun. Sawyer went through and made an entire chart for the month of March, and she came up with theme nights every other night. There was a family Olympics night. There was a bake-off where we divided up into teams, and we had to bake desserts, and we also had to dress up as chefs. I mean, it was super fun. But the most fun night was a night that I had never heard of. This is a theme you should steal. I love this. It's an anything but clothes dinner. And what does that mean? I didn't know either. It means you have dinner with your family wearing anything but clothes. You're not supposed to go nude. You are supposed to wear something other than clothes. So Sawyer, for example, took 2 huge king-size pillows and duct taped them all around her. So she put one in the front, one in the back, and then duct taped it. So that was her clothes, or her outfit. I can't remember what Oakley wore, and I can't remember what Kendall wore, oddly enough. But I took a champagne bottle box, and I put it across my chest. And the way that I fastened it to me is I poked holes in the top of it, and then I put a ribbon around it and hung it like a necklace, and then put duct tape on the side so it stayed in place. And then I made a pair of pants out of brown grocery store garbage bags, like 1 bag per leg, and then taped the front together. Now, Chris's outfit was something. Chris took a rubber pot lid So you know how you have like a metal pot lid? Well, somebody gave us once these like kind of rubber lids that you can put on top of dishes like in the summer so that flies can't get them, and it had like a little knob on it. He hung this thing across the front of him in front of his private parts. And that's all he wore except for a pair of clogs and socks. I mean, when he came down the stairs, I almost had a heart attack. He had basically a pot lid across the front of him with a ribbon around his waist and clogs on. I'll tell you, we have laughed about that moment forever. And every time, we get into a fight, Chris threatens to wear that to the rehearsal dinner for one of our kids' weddings. What you're going to learn is that it's not that hard. It only takes one additional person to cause a major shift with you and have the fun be what everybody remembers. That's what we're going to do this holiday season. In fact, this is called the first follower theory. When you're the one person doing something out of the ordinary, people think you're crazy. Like, think about if you were to go in at the holidays and you're wearing some silly outfit. One of my favorite things to do is to buy themed blazers. You can get them really cheap on Amazon that are just ridiculous. Whether they have turkeys all over them or they have holiday decorations or they blink or whatever. Hilarious. If you're the only one wearing one, you might feel like an idiot. When two of you show up, now there's a party. That first follower that joins in with you turns you from you're an idiot to this looks like fun. Same's true about a dance floor, right? The first person that gets up, you're like, ooh, bad dance move. The second one, you're like, maybe I'll go, right? That's how you go from being the lone nut job to being the leader of the fun train, everybody. That's how fun becomes a movement. And so I'm going to take the first follower theory and I'm going to recruit someone to help me. And I want you to do the same. I am going to get our daughter Sawyer on the line because she is the CFO, the Chief Fun Officer of the Robbins family. And so as I get Sawyer on the line, I want you to think of your Chief Fun Officer, the person you're going to drag in to help you. Because if you both are like, come on, guys, everyone will be like, all right. And the fun bus will run the resignation and the cynicism right on over and make sure that fun bus has a damn good music dance party mix too, because that'll also bring the energy up. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you like this one, I have a feeling you're going to like this one too. I'll see you there.